The war had been raging for 3 centuries across the Andromeda spiral, and every species in the galaxy knew the stories. The ancient databases spoke of humans in hushed, reverent tones. They were the first to achieve faster-than-light travel, the first to establish trade routes between distant systems, and the first to unite dozens of alien civilizations under a single banner of cooperation. But that was ancient history now. Commander Zextai of the Vorthan Empire adjusted his forearms nervously as he studied the tactical display before him. The holographic projection showed the current state of the war between his people and the ruthless Kethmori collective. Red markers indicated collective forces, while blue represented the dwindling Vorthan fleet. The situation looked grim. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Outer Rim colonies," reported his communications officer, her scaled skin showing stress patterns. "The collective has taken 17 more systems this cycle." Zextai's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Kethmori were unlike any enemy the galaxy had faced before. They consumed entire worlds, stripping them of resources and leaving behind only dead rock. Their technology seemed almost supernatural, their ships appearing from nowhere and vanishing just as quickly. Worst of all, they showed no interest in negotiation or surrender. "What about the other Alliance members?" Zextai asked, though he already knew the answer. "The Nauthari have retreated to their core worlds. The Epsilon Federation formally surrendered yesterday. We're on our own, sir." The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Everyone present understood what this meant. The Vorthan Empire, once proud rulers of 43 star systems, would likely fall within the next few months. Their technology was advanced, but the collective's was beyond anything they could comprehend. Lieutenant Koresh, the youngest officer on the bridge, hesitantly raised one of her tentacles. "Sir, what about the human archives?" The old databases mentioned their military capabilities. Surely if they were still around. "The humans vanished 2,000 years ago," Zextai interrupted, though not unkindly. "Every species has looked for them. The best xenorchaeologists in the galaxy have found nothing but empty settlements and abandoned space stations. They're gone, Koresh. We're the galaxy's defenders now." But even as he spoke the words, Zextai couldn't help but wonder. The human ruins scattered throughout known space told stories of incredible engineering feats. Ships the size of moons, weapons that could crack planets, defensive systems that had never been breached. If even half the legends were true, humanity had possessed technology that made current. Galactic civilizations looked primitive. The tactical alarm suddenly blared across the bridge. "Sir, we have incoming collective forces. 12 dreadnoughts and accompanying support vessels. They'll be in firing range in 30 minutes. Zextai looked at his meager fleet of 6 cruisers and 2 badly damaged battleships. They'd fought bravely for months, but this would be their last stand. "All ships, prepare for combat. We'll make them pay for every meter of space." As the crew rushed to battle stations, something strange appeared on the long-range sensors. At first, the sensor operator thought it was a malfunction. The reading showed a massive energy signature approaching from the direction of the old Terran core worlds. But that was impossible. Nothing had come from that dead region of space in millennia. "Sir, I'm detecting something unusual," the sensor operator called out, her voice uncertain. "There's a large object moving at incredible speed toward our position, but the signature doesn't match anything in our databases." Zextai moved to the sensor station, his tactical mind already analyzing possibilities. Could it be a new collective weapon? Some kind of asteroid? The readings were unlike anything he'd seen before. "Visual contact in 10 seconds, announced the operator. The main screen flickered and then displayed the approaching object. Every being on the bridge fell silent. It was a ship, but not like any vessel they'd ever seen. Sleek black metal formed angular surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The design was both beautiful and terrifying, suggesting incredible power held in check by perfect engineering. "By the ancestors," whispered Koresh. "The design matches the archaeological reconstructions. That's a human ship." The communications array crackled to life with a transmission on an ancient frequency that hadn't been used in 2,000 years. The voice that emerged was calm, professional, and unmistakably human. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force ship Retribution. We've received your distress signals and are moving to assist. Vorthan forces, please clear the engagement zone." Zextai stared at the screen in disbelief. Humans, they were real, they were alive, and they were here. But where had they been? Why had they stayed hidden for so long? And how had they known about the current crisis? "This is Commander Zextai of the Vorthan Empire. Captain Chin, we thought your species was extinct. The galaxy has been searching for humans for 2 millennia. We've been busy," came the reply, and Zextai could hear something like dark amusement in the human's voice. "We'll explain later. Right now, we have some uninvited guests to deal with." The Retribution moved past the Vorthan fleet with impossible grace. Up close, they could see it was massive, easily 3 times the size of their largest battleship, yet it maneuvered like a fighter craft. Weapon ports along its hull began to glow with an eerie blue light. The Keth Mori collective ships had arrived and immediately began their standard attack pattern. Their dreadnoughts launched swarms of smaller craft while charging their main weapons. The collective had never met resistance they couldn't overcome. Through sheer firepower and numbers, they were about to learn that humans had spent 2,000 years preparing for this moment. Captain Chion's voice came over the communications again, now carrying a tone that made every alien on the bridge instinctively step back. "Collective forces, this is your only warning. Withdraw from this system immediately or face the consequences." The collective ships didn't respond. They never negotiated, never retreated, never showed mercy. Instead, they accelerated toward the human vessel, weapons charging. "Very well," Captain Chun said quietly. "Weapons free. Show them what happens when you threaten our friends." The galaxy was about to remember why humans had once been the most feared warriors among the stars. The first shots from the Retribution were unlike anything the Vorthan crew had ever witnessed. Instead of the plasma bolts or energy beams they expected, streams of pure white light erupted from the human ship. The beams moved faster than thought, striking 3 collective dreadnoughts simultaneously. The massive enemy vessels simply ceased to exist, not exploding or burning, but vanishing as if they had never been there at all. Commander Zextai watched in stunned silence as his tactical display updated. 3 enemy capital ships had been eliminated in less than 2 seconds. The remaining collective forces seemed equally shocked, their advance faltering as they tried to process what had just happened. "What kind of weapon was that?" whispered the sensor operator, her scales shifting to patterns of awe and fear. Before anyone could answer, the human ship moved again. This time, it didn't fire its main weapons. Instead, smaller turrets along its hull came alive, sending out hundreds of tiny projectiles that seemed to dance through space with impossible precision. Each projectile sought out a collective fighter craft, and each one found its target. In 30 seconds, the entire enemy fighter screen was destroyed. The surviving collective dreadnoughts finally responded, unleashing their full firepower against the human vessel. Massive plasma cannons that could melt through moon-sized asteroids struck the Retribution's hull. The Vorthan crew expected to see the human ship's shields collapse, to witness the destruction of their mysterious saviors. Instead, the enemy fire seemed to simply disappear upon contact with the ship's hull. The dark metal absorbed the energy as if the attacks were nothing more than gentle raindrops. Captain Chin's voice came through the communications again, calm as if she were discussing the weather. "Collective vessels, last chance. Withdraw now." The enemy ships began to retreat, but Captain Chun apparently wasn't interested in letting them escape. "Helm, pursuit course? Let's make sure they spread the word about what happens when the collective threatens our allies." The Retribution accelerated with shocking speed, closing the distance to the fleeing dreadnoughts in moments. The human ship's weapons fired again, and 2 more enemy vessels vanished from existence. The remaining 4 collective ships activated emergency jump drives, fleeing to whatever dark corner of space they had come from. In less than 10 minutes, the human ship had single-handedly destroyed what would have been an extinction-level threat to the Vorthan Empire. The communications channel opened again. Commander Zextai, this is Captain Chun. Request permission to come aboard your vessel. We have much to discuss. An hour later, Zextai stood in his ship's main docking bay, watching a human shuttle approach. The small craft was as elegantly deadly as its mothership, moving with the same impossible grace. When it landed, the bay fell silent as everyone waited to see their legendary saviors. The shuttle's doors opened, and Captain Sarah Chun stepped out. She was tall by human standards, with short, dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. She wore a uniform of the same dark material as her ship, and when she moved, it was with the controlled precision of a natural predator, but what struck Zextai most was her expression. There was no arrogance, no pride in her recent victory. Instead, she looked tired, as if carrying a burden too heavy for anyone being to bear. "Commander Zextai," she said, extending her hand in the ancient human greeting. "It's good to meet you. We've been monitoring your people's resistance against the collective. You fought with honor." Zextai carefully shook the human's hand, marveling at the strength in her grip. "Captain Chin, where have your people been?" "The galaxy has searched for humans for 2,000 years. Captain Chin's expression grew somber. "We've been preparing. When we first explored the galaxy, we thought we were the only ones capable of true evil. We were wrong. We detected the collective long before they began their current expansion. We saw what they did to the civilizations in the outer rim galaxies, the billions of lives consumed." She paused, looking out through the docking bay's viewing port at the stars beyond. "We realized that everything we had built, every alliance we had forged, wouldn't be enough to stop them. So we made a choice. We withdrew from galactic civilization and began preparing for war." "But why didn't you warn us?" "We could have prepared together," Zextai asked. "Because you wouldn't have believed us," Captain Chun replied sadly. "And even if you had, the knowledge would have caused panic. Civilizations would have torn themselves apart fighting over resources, preparing for an enemy they couldn't comprehend. We decided it was better to let you live in peace for as long as possible, while we became the monsters necessary to fight the real monsters." Lieutenant Koresh, who had been listening with wide eyes, finally spoke up. "What did you mean when you said you became monsters?" Captain Chun turned to look at the young Vorthan officer. "We spent 2,000 years doing nothing but preparing for this war. We redesigned our entire species for combat, enhanced our bodies, expanded our minds, created weapons that would have been considered crimes against nature by our ancestors. We turned ourselves into the perfect killers because that's what it takes to fight the collective." She gestured toward the viewing port where the Retribution hung in space like a dark angel. "That ship out there, it's not just a vessel. It's a weapon of mass destruction powered by the focused rage of a species that watched the collective destroy the Kepler colonies while we were still debating whether to intervene. Every human aboard it has been trained from birth for this moment." Zextai felt a chill run down his spine. "How many ships like that do you have?" "Enough," Captain Chun replied simply. "The question is whether the galaxy is ready to see us use them. When we withdrew, we were explorers and diplomats. We're returning as something very different." The human captain moved to a wall display showing the current galactic situation. The collective has consumed 47 civilizations and is moving toward the core worlds. Traditional tactics won't stop them. They adapt too quickly, their technology evolves too fast. The only way to win this war is to hit them so hard and so fast that they don't have time to adapt. "What are you proposing?" Zextai asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Total war," Captain Chun said, her voice carrying no emotion. "We've identified every collective stronghold, every resource world, every staging area. We're going to destroy them all. Every last ship, every last installation, every trace of their presence in this galaxy." She turned to face the assembled Vorthan officers. "But we won't do it alone. We need the Galactic Alliance to reform, to stand together one last time. Not to fight alongside us, but to be ready for what comes after." "What comes after?" Koresh asked. Captain Chun's smile was both sad and terrifying. "After we're done with the collective, you'll need to decide whether you can trust the monsters we've become." Because once this war is over, humanity will be the most powerful force in the galaxy. And power like that either protects or destroys. The docking bay fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. The humans had returned, but they had returned as something far beyond what they once were. The question now was whether that would be salvation or simply a different kind of doom. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on the neutral station of Harmony's Edge, a massive structure that had served as the center of interstellar diplomacy for over a millennium. Representatives from every surviving civilization gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their various forms creating a sea of diversity that had once been humanity's greatest pride to behold. Ambassador Veltar of the Crystalline Dominion stood at the central podium, her translucent body refracting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns of anxiety. Fellow delegates, we face an unprecedented situation. The humans have returned, and their capabilities far exceed anything in our historical records. Murmurs filled the vast hall. The Aquatic Federation's representative floated in his environmental tank, gills fluttering with agitation. Our deep space sensors detected the energy signatures from the recent battle. The readings are impossible. No known technology could generate that level of power. The real question, interrupted the hive queen of the insectoid swarms, her mandibles clicking with each word, is whether we should trust them? They abandoned us once before. What guarantee do we have that they won't do so again? Before anyone could respond, the chamber's main doors opened with a soft hiss. Captain Sarah Chun walked in, flanked by two other humans. The entire assembly fell silent, every eye, optical sensor, and sensing organ focusing on the three figures. Chun approached the podium with measured steps, her dark uniform seeming to absorb the room's light. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the hall's acoustics without the aid of amplification. Honored delegates, I am Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force. I stand before you not as a diplomat, but as a soldier bearing an urgent warning. She activated a holographic projector that filled the center of the chamber with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas of collective control, and the assembled delegates gasped as they saw how much territory the enemy had consumed. The Kethmori Collective has claimed over 30% of the galaxy's inhabited systems. Their expansion rate is accelerating. At current projections, they will reach the core worlds within 18 months. Every civilization present here will be extinct within 3 years unless we act immediately. The ethereal representative, a being of pure energy contained within a specialized suit, spoke in harmonic tones. Captain Chun, our intelligence suggests the collective's technology adapts to whatever resistance it encounters. How do you propose to overcome this advantage? Chun's expression didn't change. By hitting them faster than they can adapt. Our strategy doesn't rely on technological superiority alone. It relies on overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. She gestured, and the hologram shifted to show dozens of human ships emerging from what appeared to be empty space. We've positioned task forces throughout collective territory. Ships equipped with weapons that function on principles the collective has never encountered. When we strike, it will be simultaneously across all their holdings. The Vorthan delegate, Commander Zextai himself, rose from his seat. Captain, the scale you're describing would require thousands of ships. How many vessels does humanity possess? Enough, Chun replied, the same answer she had given before. But we need something from each of your civilizations. Not ships or weapons, but something more valuable. The assembly waited, tension thick in the recycled air of the station. We need your people to witness what we're about to do, Chun continued. When this war ends, there can be no doubt about what happened. No myths, no legends, no misunderstandings. The galaxy needs to know exactly what humanity is capable of. The Hive Queen leaned forward, her compound eyes glittering. You speak as if victory is certain. The collective has never been defeated. Chun's smile was devoid of warmth. The collective has never fought humans. She activated another sequence on the hologram, showing detailed scans of collective vessels. Their technology is based on consumption and adaptation. They take what they need from conquered civilizations and improve upon it. But they've never encountered a species that designs technology specifically to be impossible to understand or replicate. The crystalline delegate's body flashed with patterns of confusion. Impossible to understand? That seems contrary to the principles of scientific advancement. Not impossible forever, Chun clarified. Impossible within the time frame of a battle. Our weapons operate on quantum principles that require real-time calculations across multiple dimensional phases. Even if the collective captures our technology intact, it would take them decades to reverse engineer it. We don't intend to give them decades. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. But there's something else you need to understand. The weapons we've built, the methods we're prepared to use, they go beyond conventional warfare. We're going to show the collective what it means to fight a species that has spent 2 millennia thinking about nothing but how to kill efficiently. The Aquatic Federations. Representative spoke from his tank, his translator rendering his rapid clicks into standard galactic. Captain Chin, are you suggesting genocide? I'm suggesting extinction, Chun replied without hesitation. The collective cannot be negotiated with, cannot be reformed, cannot be contained. They are a cancer that will consume everything if allowed to continue existing. The only solution is complete eradication. The chamber erupted in alarmed discussions. Several delegates activated private communication channels, while others began heated arguments with their neighbors. The concept of deliberately driving a species to extinction was abhorrent to most. Galactic civilizations, Ambassador Veltar called for order, her crystalline form flashing with authority patterns. Captain Chun, what you're describing goes against every principle of galactic law and common decency. Chun remained unmoved by the chaos around her. Your principles and laws were written by civilizations that had never encountered an existential threat like the collective. They're not evil in any way you can understand. They're simply incompatible with the continued existence of all other life. She changed the hologram again, this time showing archive footage from the Outer Rim territories that had been consumed years earlier. The images were horrific, entire worlds stripped down to bare rock. Billions of life forms converted into raw materials. Once proud civilizations reduced to empty space. This is what the collective does, Chun said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. They don't conquer, they consume. They don't enslave, they digest. Every being that falls under their control ceases to exist as anything more than processed biomass. The chamber fell silent as the full implications of the footage sank in. These weren't just military conquests. They were systematic erasures of entire species. Chun deactivated the hologram and faced the assembly directly. Humanity disappeared for 2,000 years because we saw this coming. We knew that stopping the collective would require us to become something that the galaxy couldn't accept. So we removed ourselves from your presence and became exactly what was necessary. She gestured to the 2 humans flanking her. Every human in our fleet has been genetically modified for warfare. We've enhanced our reflexes, our intelligence, our aggression, and our capacity for violence. We've built weapons that violate laws of physics that you consider inviolate. We've done things to ourselves that your species would consider monstrous. The Hive Queen's voice was barely audible. What have you become? Chun's answer was simple and terrifying. We've become the only thing in the galaxy that the collective should fear. The question now is whether you're prepared to live with the consequences of our victory. The war began at exactly 0800 Standard Galactic, time across 17 different star systems simultaneously. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the TDF Absolute, the flagship of humanity's Ghost Fleet, watching as his carefully orchestrated plan unfolded across the galaxy. All task forces report ready. Admiral, announced his operations officer, Lieutenant Commander Rosa Martinez. Like every human in the fleet, she had been enhanced far beyond baseline human capabilities. Her neural implants allowed her to process tactical data from thousands of sources simultaneously. while her reinforced skeletal structure could withstand accelerations that would crush unmodified humans. Webb nodded, his own augmented eyes tracking dozens of data streams projected directly onto his retinas. Signal all units. Operation Cleansing Fire is authorized. Execute immediately. Across the galaxy, human ships that had been hiding in the dark spaces between stars suddenly blazed to life. They emerged from stealth fields that bent space-time itself, from dimensional pockets that existed outside normal reality, and from quantum camouflage that made them indistinguishable from cosmic background radiation. In the Kepler sector, where the collective had established their largest manufacturing hub, 12 human dreadnoughts materialized around the primary industrial world. Captain Lisa Zhang of the TDF Vengeance didn't bother with warnings or surrender demands. The collective had forfeited any right to mercy when they consumed the peaceful Kepler colonies. Primary target locked, reported her weapons officer. Dimensional lance charged and ready? Fire, Zhang ordered. The weapon that struck the collective world wasn't quite like anything the galaxy had seen before. It didn't destroy the planet in the conventional sense. Instead, it shifted the entire world's mass into a parallel dimension, leaving behind only empty space and a few scattered asteroids that had been in orbit. 3 billion collective entities simply ceased to exist in this reality. Target eliminated, the weapons officer reported with professional calm. Secondary targets acquiring lock. Similar scenes played out across dozens of star systems. Human ships appeared without warning, struck with weapons that defied conventional physics, and vanished before the collective could mount any meaningful response. In 6 hours, humanity destroyed infrastructure that had taken the collective decades to build, but the most important battle was taking place in the Omega Nebula, where the collective had hidden their primary command structure. Admiral Webb had assigned this target to himself, leading a task force of humanity's most advanced vessels against the heart of the enemy's operations. The collective command station was a massive construct, larger than most moons, protected by defensive fields that could repel planet-killing weapons. It was surrounded by over 1,000 ships, including the collective's most advanced dreadnoughts. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy buildups from the enemy fleet, reported Martinez. They're preparing to engage. Webb studied the tactical display with the cold calculation of someone who had spent his entire enhanced lifespan preparing for this moment. They're adapting faster than projected. Interesting. Signal the fleet. Alpha formation, maximum aggression protocols. The human ships moved with impossible coordination, their actions synchronized by quantum-linked communication systems. Where alien fleets might spend precious minutes maneuvering for advantage, the human formation struck like a single organism. The collective responded with overwhelming firepower, unleashing energy weapons that could crack continents. But the human ships seemed to dance between the incoming fire, their movements too precise and too coordinated to be purely technological. The pilots themselves had been enhanced, their reaction times accelerated to superhuman levels. Their minds linked to their ship's systems in ways that blurred the line between human and machine. Enemy adaptation detected, announced the tactical officer. They're modifying their weapons to match our defensive frequencies. Expected, Webb replied. Switch to Protocol 7. The human weapons changed, not just in their output but in their fundamental operating principles. Where they had been using directed energy weapons, they switched to gravitational distortions. Where they had employed kinetic rounds, they began using weapons that attacked the quantum structure of matter itself. The collective ships, caught in the middle of adapting to one type of weapon, found themselves defenseless against completely different physics. 6 enemy dreadnoughts were destroyed in the span of 30 seconds, but the real surprise came when the collective command station itself began to move. The massive construct wasn't just a base. It was a ship, the size of a small moon and armed with weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. Now we see what they've been hiding, Webb murmured, watching as the station's weapon systems came online. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Prepare for, the station fired and space itself seemed to scream. The weapon didn't just destroy. It unraveled the fundamental forces that held matter together. One of Webb's heavy cruisers simply dissolved, its atoms scattered across light years in an instant. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Damage Control. "We've lost the secondary reactor." Webb's expression didn't change. "Signal the Prometheus. Tell Captain Anderson to execute his special orders." 50,000 kilometers away, the TDF Prometheus broke away from the main formation. It was smaller than the other ships in the task force, but it had been built for a single purpose. Captain James Anderson looked at his crew of 12 volunteers, all of them knowing exactly what they had signed up for. "Gentlemen, it's been an honor," Anderson said simply. Initiating final protocol. The Prometheus accelerated directly toward the collective command station, its engines glowing with the fury of a captured star. As it closed the distance, the ship began to transform. Its hull opened like a flower, revealing the weapon hidden within, a singularity generator. Powered by the ship's own reactor core, the collective station's defenses focused on the approaching vessel, pouring devastating fire into the small ship. But Anderson had already committed to his course. The Prometheus held together just long enough to reach the optimal firing position. The artificial black hole that erupted from the ship's core was precisely controlled, lasting only 0.3 seconds before collapsing in on itself. But that was enough. The collective command station, with its moon-sized bulk and planet-killing weapons, was drawn into the gravitational anomaly and compressed into a point smaller than a human fist before the singularity evaporated. The explosion that followed lit up the entire nebula, and the shockwave destroyed every collective ship within 100,000 kilometers. In the sudden silence that followed, Admiral Webb's voice carried across all frequencies. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Force. To any collective entities receiving this transmission, know that the Prometheus Protocol has been authorized for use against all your remaining installations. You have 48 hours to withdraw from all occupied territories. After that time, we will begin systematically erasing every trace of your presence from this galaxy." The message was broadcast across known space, reaching not just the collective but every civilization in the galaxy. The alien species that had begged for humanity's help now watched in terror as they realized what their saviors were truly capable of. On his flagship, Webb turned to his operations officer. "Status report, Commander." Martinez's enhanced neural implants processed data from across the combat zone. Collective command structure destroyed. Enemy fleet scattered. Primary objective achieved with acceptable losses. And the secondary objectives? All major collective installations have been eliminated or damaged beyond repair. Enemy industrial capacity reduced by 87%. Estimated time to complete eradication, 6 months. Webb nodded, feeling neither satisfaction nor remorse. He had spent 2,000 years preparing for this moment, had sacrificed his species' humanity for the sake of galactic survival. The emotion he might have felt had been genetically edited out of him long ago. Signal all task forces. Begin Phase 2 operations. No collective entity survives the next 6 months. 3 months after the initial human assault, the galaxy watched in a mixture of awe and terror as the systematic extermination of the collective continued. Every day brought new reports of collective strongholds vanishing, entire fleets disappearing without a trace, and previously impregnable fortress worlds being reduced to cosmic dust. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the TDF Reckoning, watching the final moments of what had once been the collective secondary command hub. The human fleet had arrived 6 hours ago, and now the massive space station that had coordinated the consumption of dozens of civilizations was breaking apart under gravitational stress, the quantum resonance. Charges have destabilized their primary structure, reported the ship's science officer. Complete collapse in 30 seconds. Dr. Vasquez nodded, making notes in her personal log. Unlike the enhanced soldiers around her, she was one of the few unmodified humans in the fleet, kept in her original state to serve as a bridge between what humanity had been and what it had become. Her job was to document everything, to ensure that future generations would understand exactly what had been necessary to save galactic civilization. Doctor, we're receiving a transmission from the surface of the third planet, announced the communications officer. It's on an old Vorthan frequency. Put it through, Vasquez ordered. The voice that emerged from the speakers was weak, distorted by interference and damage to the transmission equipment. This is Professor Kalanoth of the Vorthan Archaeological Survey. Is anyone receiving this? We're trapped on the surface. The collective left us here as food storage. They've been harvesting us for months. Vasquez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. How many survivors? Maybe 300. We're hiding in the old ruins. The human ruins. Captain, these aren't just any ruins. This was a research station. We found things. Things that explain why the humans disappeared. Admiral Webb's voice cut through the transmission. Dr. Vasquez, you have authorization for surface operations? Take a team and recover those survivors. I want a full report on whatever they've discovered. An hour later, Vasquez stood in the ancient corridors of what had once been Terran Research Station Omega-7. The Vorthan survivors huddled in what had been the station's main laboratory, their forms showing the malnutrition and terror of months under collective control. Professor Kalanoth, his usual calm academic demeanor shattered by his experiences, led Vasquez deeper into the facility. The records are intact, Dr. Vasquez. Somehow, the collective never found this section. They were too busy harvesting the population to explore thoroughly. The laboratory they entered was pristine, protected by stasis fields that had kept it exactly as it had been 2,000 years earlier. Holographic displays still glowed with the final research data, showing project files that made Vasquez's blood run cold. Project Apex, she read aloud. Neural enhancement protocols. Genetic modification procedures. Consciousness transfer experiments. She turned to look at Kalanoth. What is this? The answer to why humanity disappeared, the Vorthan professor replied. They didn't vanish, Dr. Vasquez. They transformed. Every single one of them. The records painted a picture that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about human history. Far from being the peaceful explorers and diplomats of legend, humanity's final generation had made a calculated decision to sacrifice everything they were for what they needed to become. The Prometheus Doctrine, Vasquez continued reading. Total genetic modification of the human species for optimal military effectiveness. Elimination of non-survival-oriented emotional responses. Enhancement of aggression, tactical intelligence, and physical capabilities. Projected completion time, 500 years. Professor Kalanoth activated another display. This is the most disturbing part. They didn't just modify themselves. They created an entirely new branch of humanity specifically designed for this war. The genetic record showed the systematic engineering of human consciousness itself. Fear had been edited out, along with mercy, doubt, and several other emotions considered counterproductive to warfare. In their place, the modified humans possessed enhanced aggression, perfect tactical awareness, and an absolute dedication to mission completion. They turned themselves into the perfect killing machines, Vasquez whispered. But they kept some of us unchanged. Why? The answer came from another file, this one marked with the highest security classifications. Project Memory, she read. Preservation of baseline human consciousness for post-war psychological rehabilitation. Vasquez understood immediately. The enhanced humans who had spent 2,000 years preparing for this war were psychologically incapable of returning to peaceful civilization. They had been designed for one purpose only. When the war was over, someone would need to remember what humanity had been like before the transformation. A new voice interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Vasquez, this is Admiral Webb. We've detected movement in the outer system. A collective fleet is approaching. Estimated arrival in 4 hours. Vasquez activated her communicator. Admiral, we've made significant discoveries here. I need more time to analyze the data. Negative, Doctor. This position is no longer defensible. We're evacuating all personnel immediately. But Professor Kellenoth grabbed her arm. Doctor, there's one more thing. The deepest levels of this facility. They were working on something called Project Restoration. I think they found a way to reverse the modifications. The evacuation alarms were already sounding throughout the facility, but Vasquez made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Show me, quickly. They descended through security checkpoints that recognized her genetic markers, past laboratories filled with research that pushed the boundaries of science and ethics. At the very bottom of the complex, they found a chamber that contained humanity's greatest hope and darkest secret. Genetic reversal protocols, Kellenoth explained, his voice hushed with awe. They created a way to undo the modifications, to restore the enhanced humans to their original state. But look at the timeline. Vasquez studied the research notes with growing horror. The process requires 60 years minimum, and it has a 40% survival rate. That's not the worst part, Kellenoth continued. Look at the psychological evaluations. The enhanced humans can't consent to the procedure. Their modified minds are incapable of choosing to give up their combat effectiveness. Someone else has to make that decision for them. The implications were staggering. Humanity had created the perfect weapons to save the galaxy, but they had also created the ultimate guardians who could never choose to step down from their post. The unmodified humans like Vasquez weren't just historians. They were the only ones who could decide when the war was truly over. Dr. Vasquez, immediate evacuation required. Admiral Webb's voice carried a note of urgency that sent chills down her spine. Collective forces are accelerating beyond projected parameters. As they rushed toward the surface, Vasquez grabbed as many data crystals as she could carry. The knowledge contained in this facility would determine not just the outcome of the current war, but the future of humanity itself. When they reached the evacuation shuttle, she found Admiral Webb waiting for her. His enhanced features showed no emotion, but his tactical implants were clearly processing thousands of variables simultaneously. Doctor, report, he ordered. Admiral, we need to talk, privately. She looked at the Vorthan survivors boarding the shuttle. And we need to decide what happens when this war is over. Webb's modified consciousness was incapable of understanding her implication, but something in her tone triggered deep-seated protocols. After the mission, Doctor. Right now, we have a war to finish. As their ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving the ancient research station to be consumed by the approaching collective fleet, Vasquez realized the true burden that had been placed on her shoulders. She held the future of two different versions of humanity in her hands, and she would soon have to choose which one deserved to survive. The first sign of trouble came from the outer rim, where long-range sensor stations began picking up massive energy signatures moving through dark space. The signals appeared and vanished without pattern, defying every known law of physics. When collective investigation teams arrived at the coordinates, they found nothing but empty void and the lingering taste of exotic radiation. Archon Veltar stood in the emergency session of the Galactic Council, his confident demeanor from months ago now replaced with barely concealed anxiety. The holographic displays around him showed a galaxy-wide map dotted with red warning beacons. Each beacon marked another impossible event. The humans have been silent for exactly 97 standard days, reported Intelligence Coordinator Zenth, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. No communications, no trade requests, no diplomatic overtures. It's as if they simply vanished from existence. Good, growled Warlord Krex of the Hegemony, his massive form dominating one corner of the chamber. Let them hide in their little system and play with their primitive toys. The galaxy is better without their chaos. But Coordinator Zenth's next words wiped the smugness from his face. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring station at Proxima Nexus detected a fleet movement. 37 vessels of unknown configuration, traveling at speeds that should be impossible. When our patrol ships moved to investigate, the unknown fleet simply disappeared. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. The Proxima Nexus was over 1,000 light-years from Earth, in a region of space that had been thoroughly mapped for millennia. Nothing should be able to move through that area without detection. Perhaps it was a sensor malfunction, suggested Counselor Theises, though her voice lacked conviction. We thought so too, Zenth continued. Until similar sightings began occurring across 17 different sectors. Always the same pattern, human ships appearing where they shouldn't be, doing things they shouldn't be able to do, then vanishing before anyone can respond. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If humans had developed technology that allowed them to move freely through collective space without detection, every assumption about their exile was wrong. Veltar's primary arms gestured for calm, but his secondary arms were trembling. Have any of these vessels engaged in hostile action? Not directly, Zenth admitted. But 3 hegemony expansion fleets have reported equipment failures and navigation errors that force them to abandon their missions. All failures occurred in systems the humans previously claimed were strategically important. Warlord Krex slammed his fist against his throne. Impossible. Our technology is hardened against any known form of electronic warfare. No primitive species could. His words were cut off by an emergency alert that filled the chamber with pulsing red light. The massive display screens that lined the walls suddenly went black, then displayed a single image that sent shock waves through every delegate present. Earth. But not the Earth they remembered. The planet that had seemed like a backward world just months ago now blazed with energy. Massive orbital structures surrounded it like a crown of stars. Ships moved between them in patterns too complex for most species to comprehend. And at the center of it all, something that made even the most advanced collective scientists question their understanding of reality. A space elevator. Not the crude chemical rockets and simple tethers that most young species built, but a structure that seemed to stretch beyond the planet's atmosphere into folded space itself. It pulsed with energy that registered on sensors as pure impossibility. This footage was taken 6 hours ago by one of our long-range reconnaissance probes. Zenth's voice was barely a whisper. The probe was detected and destroyed moments after recording, but not before transmitting this data. The image shifted, showing more details that defied explanation. Human ships that moved without visible propulsion. Weapons platforms that channeled stellar energy. Most disturbing of all, figures in spacesuits working in environments that should have killed any known form of life. Enhanced humans, breathed Doctor. Silix of the ethereals, her gossamer form trembling with recognition. They've been conducting genetic modification on themselves. Those aren't baseline humans anymore. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. Genetic enhancement was heavily regulated by collective law. Most species had tried it at some point in their development and learned why the restrictions existed. Enhanced beings were unpredictable, unstable, dangerous to themselves and others, but these humans looked stable. More than stable, they looked evolved. How long have they been preparing for this? Veltar asked, his voice hollow. Zenth's form flickered faster now, cycling through colors that indicated extreme distress. Based on the infrastructure we're seeing, they've been working on this for decades. Maybe longer. Everything they showed us, everything we thought we understood about their capabilities, it was all carefully crafted deception. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates began shouting over each other. Accusations flew between species. The ethereals demanded immediate investigation. The synthesis calculated probability matrices that all returned impossible results. The Watchers, for the first time in recorded history, looked genuinely afraid through it all. Warlord Krex's voice cut through the noise like a blade. It doesn't matter what they've built. It doesn't matter what tricks they've learned. They're still just one species, confined to one system. We are 800 civilizations with the combined might of the galaxy behind us. But his bravado was hollow, and everyone knew it. The collective strength had always come from its technological superiority and the ancient systems that controlled galactic infrastructure. If humans had bypassed those systems entirely, if they had developed capabilities that operated outside known parameters, the thought was too terrifying to complete. As if summoned by their fears, The communication arrays suddenly came online with an incoming transmission. Every delegate turned toward the central display as a figure materialized in the holographic field. It was Ambassador Zara-Chun, but not as they remembered her. Her eyes held flecks of gold that seemed to shift and move. Her movements had a fluid grace that spoke of enhanced reflexes and strength. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that touched something deep in the primitive brain of every species present. "Greetings, Galactic Council," she said, with a smile that was both beautiful and predatory. "We wanted to thank you for the gift you gave us 97 days ago. Exile has been educational." Behind her, the image shifted to show glimpses of what humanity had become in their isolation. Cities that floated in space without visible support. Humans working alongside beings that looked like living starlight. Technologies that turned matter into energy and back again with casual ease. "We're calling it the Human Renaissance," Chun continued. "Amazing what you can accomplish when you're no longer bound by someone else's rules about what's possible." The transmission ended, leaving 800 species staring at empty space and contemplating a terrifying new reality. Humanity was no longer the exile begging for acceptance. They had become something the galaxy had never seen before, and they were just getting started.